The great George Carlin said it best. If at first you don't succeed, redefine success.
We got all things situated. The mathematics were calculated. I feel wasted and I feel jaded. The process here is so complicated. 2 steps forward and 3 steps back.
Happy 2025 all. This is Tony Volpicello. We are the Career Jigsaw Podcast. Welcome back to Season 2, Episode 9, our final episode of the season. I will humbly say that I'm very proud of the content and advice we've shared so far. We only have one real goal for this podcast: give great advice that helps others in their career journey. That's it. So this is the Unwrapped episode, and there's 3 things we'll cover today. First, 2024 was the first year of the podcast, so I'll spend a little time today wrapping it up. Second, we'll then unwrap what we have in store for 2025. And then third, we'll finish with sharing where else we're also trying to make a difference. So let's walk through 2024 and highlight some of the advice we covered in the podcast. We won't walk through every episode today, but we will touch on some of the high points. We started with resumes, our very first episode. I believe we dispensed some good advice here, and here is the closing quote that I think summarizes best our resume advice. So let me boil down everything we talked about today into 3 immediate action steps. Number 1, update your resume now and every 3 months. Number 2, commit to improving the 3 key areas of your resume: look and feel, content with achievements, and customization. And number 3, understand and utilize AI to help you achieve your resume goals. AI can help you create, customize, and even score your resume, so do your homework here. So after we wrapped up resumes, we switched to interviews for our next 2 episodes, both from the perspective of the employee as well as the hiring manager. First, let's hear the takeaways for employees out there. So what are the top 3 takeaways from today's podcast? Well, first, understand the 3 types of interview questions. Tell me about you, tell me about how, or tell me about a time. Second, master the approach on how to handle each of these questions with either the journey, the 3-answer method, or the situation, action, outcome framework. And then third key takeaway for today, exceed expectations for homework. Really prepare for questions in advance. Do your research on the job and the company. Do site visits or store visits where you can. And if appropriate, write an action plan on what you would do if you got this job like you already had it. And now let's hear our advice for hiring managers. Recapping the top 3 takeaways from today. Takeaway number 1, create an interview question agenda that is very focused on what you learned from the resume and what the required job skills are. Your interviews are no longer a one-size-fits-all. And make sure there's a heavy dose of tell me how or tell me about a time. Takeaway number 2, implement a new policy of giving on-the-spot feedback at the end of the interview to all internal candidates. The company owes it to them, and you will be building a following. And then takeaway number 3, round out your hiring decision process by assessing what homework was completed, what intangibles happened like promptness, communication skills, etc., as well as interview follow-up. We then moved inward to talk about development plans. I think this portion of that episode highlights really well the best way to approach the content of that development plan. Okay, let's talk about what's commonly known as the 3 E's of a good development plan: education, experience, and exposure. So what does each mean? Well, for education, this is a learning investment. For example, it could be taking a class, watching a video, or reading a book. And education certainly has a place in laying the groundwork for your development plan. Then there's experience. This is the hands-on stuff where the real learning occurs. This is doing it. This is making mistakes but learning from them. So you can watch a video on riding a bike, but where the real learning occurs is by getting on the bike and trying to ride it. Then there's exposure. So think of this like building your network, but not just a network of likes and followers. Think of this like you're building your constituency that would vote to keep you on the island. So exposure can include them seeing you in action so they can endorse you. So exposure really can include a mentor relationship as part of your action plan. And we'll review some guidelines around what a good mentor relationship should look like in a bit. So in building a plan, be sure to include items in 1, 2, or all 3 of the 3 E's, but don't spread them equally. So in my opinion, 60 to 70% of your plan should be experience. Another 10 to 20 should be education, and then finally another 10 to 20% exposure. But again, to reinforce, the real learning occurs with hands-on experience. After we wrapped up resumes and interviews, we switched topics to talk more about existing manager-employee relationships. This episode was titled Managing Your Manager, and I interviewed my old boss, Kevin Dolan, who had this to share with us.
The 2 key components of what defines a strong relationship is that, on the first part, do you understand very clearly what the objectives are for your manager? What are her or his objectives? What are they trying to get done beyond just the task at hand or the metrics? And the opposite of that is, does your manager understand what your objectives are? Yes, you want to move ahead. You want to earn the highest compensation you possibly can. You want to hit your goals. You want to be admired. Whatever that is, how do you find a way that, despite it being assumed to be obvious, I have found in my 40-year career that it's often not obvious, that you do have to invest some time in making sure you understand their point of view and where, for lack of a better phrase, where they're coming from, as opposed to just being the top position in the hierarchy. And likewise, how do you invest in time with them, really helping them understand what you're looking to accomplish?
Great advice from Kevin. In other Season 1 episodes, we talked about getting in your DeLorean, going back in time, and giving career advice to your 25-year-old self, as well as an interview with another former manager of mine, Anna Colton, who shared with us her perspective on a career and the value in working in different roles and in different parts of the company. Here's a small portion where Anna talks about this more.
I learned early on, and I'll simplify it, but you can either go deep or you can go broad with your career. And by that, I mean, you can go deep and really become an expert in your field, inside and out. So internally, you become the go-to person. Externally, you have a reputation around that specific business. The alternative, in a sense, is to go broad, which is what I did. And I really enjoyed the variety in the business. But in particular, and you hit on this, you start to learn how to manage change. That becomes really a talent that you have. And we all know that the only thing that stays the same is change. So to the extent that you can build that skill to manage change, to learn from the ground up, to figure out how to do things either differently or for different sectors or different client bases, to learn what is transferable and what isn't, I think those are skills that are very valuable, in particular in this job market.
In between Seasons 1 and 2, we produced 6 short 2-minute mini episodes called Puzzle Pieces, focused on giving you quick advice to start your day. Okay, now let's move to Season 2, where we added something new to our episode format. We called them Industry Spotlights. Here we conducted Q&A sessions with guests in specific fields. In Season 2, we had 3 industry spotlights and 1 full-length career interview. I'm going to share quotes from each, and I think you'll see a common theme here. Let's start with Jenna, our very first industry spotlight. Jenna works in publishing and had this to share when I asked her what's been the most satisfying parts of her career so far.
I mean, a lot of it has, but I think the top contender would be anytime I'm out in the field, whether It be at a bookstore, a school, a library, or even a convention like the Comic-Cons. And I get to see how excited kids are getting books and reading about characters that they see themselves in. It reminds me why I do what I do, and that it's a privilege to read and be able to escape like that. So the kids' excitement is what keeps me going.
Pretty heartwarming. Our second episode of Season 2 was also an industry spotlight, this time on information technology. Here's what Lee had to say when I asked him about a career in IT.
If you're looking to enter IT in this day and age, you need to have a natural curiosity, for starters. If you don't have that natural curiosity, that desire to learn, to understand how things work, to solve problems, to come up with that problem solution, then IT is not necessarily the right fit for you. But if you're curious, if you're always kind of tinkering, if you really want to understand the root cause of something, then I think IT could be a great fit for you. You don't have to be a math nerd like myself or a science, have a bent for science. Natural curiosity combined with hard work will allow anybody to enter and succeed in IT, in my opinion.
The next quote comes from Jeff Barker, a friend and former manager. His interview was less of an industry spotlight and more of a career spotlight. Recently retired, Jeff had this to share.
I was always intrigued by the effect of putting a product, whatever that product is, in a customer's hand and having achieved customer satisfaction. And if it's a check to a not-for-profit or a book in a child's hand or someone getting a new appliance, that moment is just really very special to me. It's just kind of how I grew up. I think it's in my DNA somewhere.
I hope you're starting to see a theme with the quotes here. Now, one of my favorite episodes was with Lee, a New York City school teacher. Such an admirable profession. And Lee shared with me why she loves what she does during this segment of our episode.
Over the course of time, I have worked with some students who are very, very special needs. And I have a student, for example, in recent years where they were not able, because of a disability, to speak. And several times over the course of the year, he said my name, this student. And it was really heartwarming knowing that he had such difficulty forming words, and he was able to come up and be like, and then said my name. And I was like, oh my God. So things like that are very, very rewarding to me.
Wow. I hope that inspires you to do something you love or find love in something you're doing. We then tackled new ground by hosting our very first panel discussion. We had on 3 retired executives who didn't hold back sharing their thoughts on the challenges women face in the workplace and their direct advice to these women. Here's the first quote.
I've noticed over these years of coaching women in women's leadership. So their companies are sending them because they're very high potential women. They fill in these applications, which are fairly tedious, and it's a big honor to get into this program. And I'm sitting in the room with 5 of them in the small team, and I'm looking at them, and I am completely blown away by them. They are so impressive. They present themselves well. And then by the second day, when they let their vulnerabilities out, I realize that the biggest barrier they face is themselves. Their companies want to promote them, and they're not sure inside they can do it. And I see the imposter syndrome over and over and over with them. And I urge them to see themselves as others see them. So I say, I am a very good judge of character. I'm a very good judge of what it takes to succeed in this corporate world. And this is how I see you. And you need to close that gap from how you see yourself inside to how others see you. And when you do that, you can step into your personal power. And I think you just overcome that barrier.
This was just one small portion of the advice these leaders had to share. For me, powerful. And here's another.
Women are offered a job and this is the salary, and they say thank you and accept it. And when all of their male peers fight back for more money and more benefits. And it's like, why are women doing this? So salary negotiations, first of all, is fact-based. It's not emotional. You need to know your worth at all times. So the way I just feel so strongly that young women especially need to keep interviewing. It's not as if they get a job and they should just stay in the job. I don't care if you love your job, go out and interview, have a good relationship with a recruiter, and always know what your job is worth and what your competitors would consider paying you. And just going out to interview gives you so much information. And now salaries are published way more than they used to be, and it should be transparent in companies as well. But do your homework, really, really know what it is, and always ask for more. It's okay to. It doesn't mean that you don't like your job. It doesn't mean that you're greedy. It means that you know your worth, and that's important.
So a big special thanks to Cynthia, Betsy, and Anna for participating in this panel discussion, and especially for the amazing advice they gave. We then wrapped up Season 2 with a review of a subject very near and dear to me, emotional intelligence, also known as EQ. Here's just a quick segment of what we shared on this important topic. I want to be really clear about 2 points. Point number 1, EQ does not mean merely being nice. There are times when merely being nice is an example of low EQ. It's more about knowing what approach to take in a given situation. So there are many times when being very direct is exactly what is needed and a demonstration of high EQ. The point here is there's not a one-size-fits-all approach. And point number 2, EQ does not mean letting your feelings run amok. It's not about leading with feelings 100% of the time, but it also isn't about leaving feelings 100% out all the time. It's about managing feelings so they are appropriate and effective. So that wraps up 2024. 2 seasons, 16 full-length episodes, and 6 mini-episodes. I can't thank enough our listeners and our guests. Now on to 2025. So what topics will you see in 2025 from the podcast? Well, there are a few. The first will be what I would call the voice of HR, human resources. We will hear direct feedback from HR executives and recruiters, a bit of a look behind the curtain. We'll also do more industry spotlights, including psychology and small business. And we'll bring more and new discussion topics, including negotiating salary, turning down a promotion, imposter syndrome, executive presence, and the work from home challenges for both employees and employers. And finally, I want to share what else you can expect from us and where else we need your support. So first, we've conducted and will continue to conduct resume consultations. This is on our website, thecareerjigsaw.com, and this is continued free advice to help you present a better resume. And it's open to any listener or friend of the podcast. And for those of you who have taken us up on this service, I just want to tell you how much I enjoyed getting to know each of you and hopefully helping. So if you want a second look at your resume, go to our website, thecareerjigsaw.com, click on the resume review button, upload your resume, and we'll get back to you within 24 hours with feedback. Or simply text the word resume to 240-JIGSAW2 and we'll send you the link. And before I wrap, I just wanted to share something else on the resume consultations because it's evolved. Many of our listeners have had their resumes reviewed, and in that process, these conversations have led to other topics like interview prep and career development. It's very gratifying to help in this way, and again, these types of conversations are at no cost to the listener. What else can you expect from us? Well, in Season 3, we will produce another round of puzzle pieces. And again, these are 2-minute advice segments designed to jumpstart your day. Think of these as starting your Monday in the car and getting some great advice quickly. Now, what else do we need from you in terms of support? Well, I'd love to get referrals from our listeners referring new listeners. But this isn't what it seems. Not an attempt to blow up the podcast and to get the millions of followers. For me, it's about having greater impact. The more followers we have, the more others will have our podcast recommended in their feed. This is crucial to us maximizing our reach. There are two ways to refer new listeners to the podcast. First, go to our website, thecareerjigsaw.com, hit the Refer New Listeners link, complete the quick info, and we will send an invitation to your referral. Or simply text REFER to 240-JIGSAW2 to receive our referral form. That's it. We are a wrap. Thanks for an incredible 2024, and I hope you're as excited as I am about our big plans for 2025. Season 3 kicks off soon. Be safe, be happy.